confuse you with a sniper, and they'll take you out. And he said it kind of jokingly. And I remember when I heard that, it kind of hit me wrong, and I thought, that's kind of sad, you know. But anyway, Dave was like, fuck, and he jumped back over the fence. He was like, shit, he threw the golf balls down. But, you know, it's like, I can see that there's some dangerous men in there that have been created by, you know, our movie system. You know, you have PG-13, you have R, and that's there for a reason. You know, people can get very upset and disturbed by mental images, by visual images. And, you know, I don't know what I would do if I knew that somebody had shown Jet Scarface. That would deeply, deeply disturb him. When he saw what happened to his puppy, I guess a year or two ago, I don't remember when it was, it severely affected Jet. I mean, and, you know, the way it all went down, it affected him. And we've since then, you know, watched him real close and all that kind of stuff. And he's normal. He's an angel, but he's a great kid. I was with him all night tonight, all day today. But I just think that, and I would hope that you would agree, because this is fixing to get really, it gets even worse. To imagine that somebody in the VA hospital would release this guy. You know, he's a loaded gun. He's a time bomb. And so let's go back to that. But that was just my 2 cents.
I much trusted the VA to take care of my son, who was a veteran, because he had given his time and energy to our country. And I hate so much that I counted on them. But I did not know what... I was at a loss for other resources. And I needed help for my son.
And he agrees to help.
He did.
And, of course, you had absolutely no idea that asking him for help, that a week later he would murder Chris Kyle and Chad Littlefield. You of course, had no idea.
I would have never asked if I had an idea that this could happen.
What do you say to yourself about that now?
It's a very hard feeling for me. And I know it's not my fault. And of course, hindsight's 20/20.
8 days before this had happened, you had begged the VA to not turn him out.
I did. And they kept him one more day. And I said, no, he's not ready.
You said, don't let him go.
Don't let him go. He can't carry on a conversation. He was still not Eddie. And they said, well, he'll stay tonight. At that point, he'd been there 4 days, and that's not very long.
But you told him he's not ready.
I did.
Don't let him go.
And the very next day, they called and they said they were going to release him. And by the time I arrived there, Eddie was wandering the parking lot. They'd already discharged him.
Did you know about the episode with his girlfriend, Jen?
We're seeing a face of Eddie Routh the public hasn't seen yet.
Routh's girlfriend, Jennifer Weed, testified Routh began behaving strangely months before the murders. She says he would go weeks without bathing and at one point made her communicate on a legal pad because he thought the government was listening.
When I tried to speak to him, he would take his hand and he would cover my mouth because he didn't want them to hear what I had to say.
Did he tell you who he thought was listening to him?
It was typically the government. He definitely had paranoia about the government out to get him.
Did you know that he had clutched a butcher knife and said he was going to defend her from government agents?
I knew a little bit about that, and I talked to Jen, and she was saying that Eddie was not in any way trying to harm me. He was trying to protect me.
Did you tell Chris that he had been paranoid, that he had taken weapons before? The knife, the .357 Magnum at the lake? And
no, because I didn't know they were paranoid delusions. I just thought they were a part of the PTSD.
Did you tell Chris that he had a history of drugs and alcohol?
I did tell him he had a history of alcohol, and Chris said he understood that because he also did.
You know, PTSD is generally not violent, but if you pour drugs and alcohol into the mix, the incidence of violence ramps up dramatically. At the time that you were talking to Chris and in the ensuing days, was Eddie talking about pigmen and all of this?
The ones in the sky are the ones that fly, you know what I mean? The pigs in the world, they can truly say they're pigs. I've been smelling it this whole time, you know.
He wasn't talking about the pigmen and stuff in those few days after the hospital. He was very suicidal because he felt like that was his only way out. It was pretty difficult as a mom to be driving home from work and just hoping and praying all the way home that when I get there I don't find my son dead.
Let's fast forward to February 2nd. Take me through the moment that you found out that he had murdered Chad Littlefield and Chris Kyle.
Coming up.
I had Chris's number in my phone and I dialed it and no one answered. It was a heart-stopping moment.
He said that he killed 2 guys. They went out to a shooting range and he's all crazy. He's psychotic.
Have you ever watched a scary movie and the villain's eyes turn black? Mm-hmm. It was that moment, but it was in real life. And it scared the living hell out of me.
Take me through the moment that you found out that he had murdered Chad Littlefield and Chris Kyle.
Raymond and I had met in Abilene for the weekend. I needed a mental health day for me. And I needed some time to talk to Raymond and try to make a better plan for what we could do to help our son. Raymond had been talking with the VA in Amarillo, and we wanted to move Eddie up there so that he could go to a different hospital and hopefully get the help he needed. Then that day never came. Our daughter Laura calls, and she is hysterical. And I knew the moment I heard her voice that something really had gone wrong. And she tells me Eddie's killed 2 people. And I knew she was telling me the truth. My heart just kept saying no. No, Eddie could never do this.
That's when I took the phone away from her and told Laura to call the police. And I called my neighbor next door because he was the police officer. If you see Eddie, stop him.
Did she tell you who?
She had no idea. She didn't know.
It don't matter who it was.
But I did.
You knew?
When she told me he was driving a black truck, I knew that truck. I'd seen it before. I'd opened the doors on it to let the kids out at school. I knew it was Chris's truck. I had Chris's number in my phone and I dialed it and no one answered. It was a heart-stopping moment.
You're home on February 2nd, and he shows up at your house.
Yes.
He walks in and says what?
Is the world freezing over? And the hair on my neck stood up, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I killed 2 guys today. And I said, who did you kill? I don't know who they are. And I said, who did you go with? I think his name is Chris. He said, what are you talking about? I told him, I said, if you're telling me the truth, you need to call the police and turn yourself in, because I didn't know, does he have a gun? Is he going to harm me? What the hell is going on? Because at this point, I didn't honestly believe him.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe him, right?
No. And I said, okay, well, then I'm calling the cops.
Listen, my brother just came by here. He's now left, but he told me that he's committed a murder, and I'm terrified for my life.
Okay, hold on.
Because I don't know if he's going to come back here.
Okay, who did he say he had killed?
He said that he killed 2 guys. They went out to a shooting range, and he's all crazy. He's psychotic. He started talking about people sucking his soul, and he said that he took their souls before they could take his. And we started walking to the door, and I got out on my front porch, and I saw a massive pickup truck with giant knobby tires, and I felt like I was going to throw up.
Because you knew that not his truck.
Right. And I looked at him and I said, I love you, but I hate your demons. And as soon as I mentioned demons, have you ever watched a scary movie and the villain's eyes turn black? Mm-hmm. It was that moment, but it was in real life. And it scared the living hell out of me.
At one point, he said, love you, Beezer.
Yeah.
That's your nickname? He calls you Beezer?
Yeah.
Was that his goodbye to you?
I don't want to cry. I never really thought about it until just now that was our goodbye.
I was so scared for Laura, too, because Laura knew that wasn't her brother that showed up at her house.
As a mother, what did you say to yourself when you realized this is real, or he's done this, he's killed 2 men?
Coming up.
The police officer was holding the phone up, and I was telling my son to get out of the damn truck. Get out of the truck, son.
Were you afraid they were going to shoot him?
Inside the mind of the man who shot the American sniper continues.
The black truck driven by Ralph led police on a chase that reached speeds of 100 miles an hour. It shows officers tried to ram the truck, but Ralph surrendered minutes later.
As a mother, what did you say to yourself when you realized this is real, or he's done this, he's killed 2 men and driven off in one of their cars?
I just kept thinking I'm the mom of someone who's killed. It hurt me so deeply that my child could do this. I just couldn't even imagine that it was real.
What did you say to yourself when you realized your boy had murdered 2 people?
Why did my son do this? What went down? The police officer was holding the phone up, and I was telling my son to get out of the damn truck. Get out of the truck, son. Because it was wrong.
Were you afraid they were going to shoot him if he didn't turn himself over?
Yes, sir. I did. I really did. Some of the guns are still in the truck. I'm hurt that a situation like this could even happen. The sad part is it's over and over and over and over from the VA hospital. They still turning people out. They ain't trying to help them. They just letting them go.
Is the VA to blame, or is your son to blame?
My son is to blame for shooting these 2 people.
We've never denied that Eddie did this.
I ain't saying he didn't do this, Dr. Phil. But if the sun guns would have kept him in the hospital, we wouldn't have his problem.
The VA had the opportunity to keep Eddie in there.
Green Notes wrote a damn letter to him and told him he is danger to himself and others.
Yes, and they had set up a mental health hearing in Dallas County Court for the 29th of January. And their doctor said that Eddie needed to remain hospitalized for 30 to 90 days because he was a danger to others. I drive him back to the VA for his follow-up with the psychiatrist, and he begins to look at Eddie's records, and he says, well, the first thing I see here is that the dosage of medication that they've given your son is only a child-sized dosage. We definitely need to increase that. He'd ask Eddie a question. Eddie would say, roses are yellow. I mean, his answers, he couldn't even answer the question.
Totally out of touch with reality.
Totally out of touch with reality. Why can't we get Eddie readmitted? It's obvious by looking at him.